What's up, y'all? Welcome back to The Garden. I'm your host, Taryn Balzana, and I am so glad that you're here. This is week 2 of our worship series, and if you are just now joining us, my goal for this season of The Garden is every month we will be diving into different Bible stories and different topics and just deep diving into an overarching theme and breaking it down throughout the month. And then on the last week of the month, I will be having a guest to just give some personal application and how it applies to our lives now and personal experiences. And so this month's theme is worship. And this is week 2 of our worship series. And so today I want to talk about the sacrifice of worship. So we are going to we're going to look at 2 different stories in the Bible, and the first one is found in John 12, 1 through 8. So John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. And we'll read it, and then we will dive into it. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having a charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." So now diving into it, Mary took a pound of expensive oil. In the midst of the supper, Mary gave a remarkable gift to Jesus. It wasn't unusual to wash the feet of a guest back then, but it was unusual to do it during the meal itself, to use very costly oil to do it, and to wipe the feet with her hair. It was tremendously humble. I mean, when a guest entered the home, usually the guest's feet were washed with water and the guest's head was anointed with a dab of oil or perfume. But here, Mary used this precious ointment and anointed the feet of Jesus. She considered her precious oil only good enough for his feet. To attend to the feet was the task of the most lowly slave. Therefore, Mary's action indicated great humility as well as great devotion. Mary's gift was an extreme act of generosity. She used a pound of very costly oil. I mean, back then, spices and ointments were often used as an investment because they were small, portable, and they could easily be sold. And Judas believed that this oil was worth 300 denarii, which was worth a year's wages for a working man back then. Mary's gift was unselfconscious. Not only did she give the gift of the expensive oil, she also wiped his feet with her hair. This means that she let down her hair in public, something a Jewish woman did not do back then. A Jewish lady never let her hair out in public because interpreted that she had loose morals. And so it was just not looked at very highly if a woman did that. But Mary didn't stop to calculate public reaction. Her heart went out to her Lord, and she expressed her feelings toward him in this beautiful and touching act. In all of this, Mary is a study of devotion to Jesus. The life of Mary is painted for us in 3 memorable pictures in which she is at the feet of Jesus in each one. In Luke 10:39, Mary sat at Jesus' feet and learned. In John 11:32, Mary fell at Jesus' feet and surrendered. In John 12:3, Mary anointed Jesus' feet and honored Jesus. There's a quote that says, "You must sit at his feet or you will never anoint them. He must pour his divine teaching into you, or you will never pour out a precious ointment upon him. Basically meaning that you can't give Jesus anything of true value unless you've first spent time with him, learning from him, sitting at his feet. First, you have to receive from Jesus his words, his love, his truth. And then out of that overflow, you're able to give back to him genuine worship, service, and sacrifice. Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, in a short time, Judas would end up betraying Jesus. In some chronologies, it's even said to have happened the next day, but we're not for sure though. His betrayal was so much darker when contrasted with the brightness of Mary's devotion to Jesus. Judas probably objected to Mary's gift because he was shamed by her simple and powerful display of love. I mean, regardless, this anointing of Jesus' feet happened 6 days before he was nailed to a cross. So, in that time frame, somewhere, Judas also betrayed Jesus. Judas already had a heart issue. He had already had internal things that he was going through and he was dealing with to make him want to sell Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver. It said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii?" This was kind of like an awkward scene. Awkward for Jesus, awkward for Mary, awkward for the other disciples that were there. And he had such a sharp sense of financial values, but no appreciation of what God valued, of the bigger picture of this act of service, of this act of worship. He thought that this was too much love and devotion to show to Jesus. And the "isn't this all a little much" attitude was contagious. I mean, in the Matthew 26 account of this story, it says, "But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, 'Why this waste?'" Which shows Judas was not alone in this objection. Others seem to have felt that Judas made some sense, which is crazy to me because they were his disciples and they spent every day with him. And so they knew better than anyone the honor and respect and worship that Jesus deserved. But at this point, it was a little much to pour out the oil that was never yours to begin with. I mean, all we have in excess and all we have period is because of God. And so to pour it out for God and then someone say, but that's a little much. That's a little too far. That's just literally crazy to me, but also, how often would we do it? I'll give God my nights, but waking up early in the morning is just a little much. That's a little too far. I'll give God my action of serving in the church, but giving him my money is just a little too much. I'll give God my 10%, but anything more is just a little too much. I'll give God 30 minutes in the morning, but anything more is just a little too much. I mean, I'm going to go to church Sunday and Wednesday, but I mean, not watching a TV show just because it doesn't talk about things that honor and glorify God, that's just a little too much. I mean, how many times do we compromise things and we're like, that's just a little too far. That's just a little too much. And we give him an inch and nothing more. Not willing to sacrifice anything for the very one who sacrificed everything for us. I mean, he gave us his life. And we can't sacrifice the music we listen to, or the time in our day, or the shows we watch, or the money we have. Like, hey, Jesus, I know you died on the cross and like you bore the weight of like all my sin. But you know, I just really can't. I can't give you more than 30 minutes. I just can't stop watching this show, even if it doesn't like honor you, because I really enjoy it. I just don't have time to spend time in your word. I'm just too busy. And I know you did all that for me, and that's great, and I appreciate it. And like, I want your grace and your love and your mercy, but I'm just only going to give you like a little bit in return. I mean, when you put it like that, do you understand like how crazy that sounds? And yet we've all done it. When I put it in terms like that, like when that's essentially what we're doing and saying, that's ridiculous. And yet we've all done it or do it. Now, if you couldn't tell, that was not in my notes, but I felt like it needed to be said. So moving on, Jesus told him to leave her alone. If we are extreme in our love for Jesus, he will not criticize us. That was what Judas did. It's much better to be like Mary, extreme in our love for Jesus, than to be like Judas, criticizing the others who show such a great love for Jesus. I can't stand when others do have such a great love for Jesus and it radiates through them and others stifle them. For why? I mean, do we not understand the extent of who he is? And when someone does, because usually it's because they make us insecure in the way that we worship Jesus, and so we tend to stifle them, or we stifle ourselves because other people's worship doesn't look like ours, but that doesn't mean that ours is worse or not good. Hey, the fact that our worship doesn't look like other people's is sometimes probably a good thing. If you're a little more radical and vocal about your love for Jesus and others aren't, you keep walking it out. You keep being on fire, and don't let others in this world pour water on your fire for Jesus. You give him whatever you see fit. Whatever you feel led to give him, whatever you feel led to sacrifice, you do it. That's between you and God. And as we talked about last week, you don't live for the approval of man. Yeah, Mary got a lot of shade for pouring out that oil. A pound of oil on Jesus' feet. But yet she felt that that oil was only good enough for his feet. She felt that that was all she had to give. The best that she had to give. And she gave it all. And even though in other people's eyes it was a waste, because it could have been sold for 300 denarii, it wasn't a waste to God. He saw her devotion. He saw her humility. He saw the lengths to which she was willing to go to show him how much she loves and appreciates him. In Mark 14:9, in the Mark account of this story, it says, "Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial of her." This meant a lot to Jesus, and he wanted this to be talked about for generations throughout the whole world. The sacrifice to which she was willing to go through, of her reputation, of her resources for Jesus, that was worth talking about, and he wanted everybody to know about what she had done. In Mark, it doesn't mention Mary's name, but it mentions the promise. In John, it mentions her name and not the promise. It doesn't matter whether our names are remembered as long as our actions point to Jesus. As long as our heart and our motives point to him, that's what matters. When we're no longer here, it doesn't matter our names, but that the life we lived honored God. My other example of sacrificial worship is in Mark 12:41 through 44. Mark chapter 12, verse 41 through 44 says, "And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, 'Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on.'" He saw how the people put money into the treasury. Jesus looks at us when we give, and he notices how we give. He's more interested in how we give than in how much we give. And in seeing how the people gave, Jesus wasn't studying how or what, but looking more at the motive and the heart behind it. It says, "Many who were rich put in much. Then one poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny." Jesus noticed a long line of rich people who put in a lot of money, perhaps making some kind of display to call attention to the amounts in which they were giving. But the one poor widow was different and offered 2 copper coins, which in the King James Version, it refers to them as mites. And a single mite had little to no purchasing power. And 2 mites maybe got her a few grapes or a small loaf of bread. Just to put some perspective on the situation. 2 mites. 2 small copper coins. The wonderful thing about this widow's giving was that she had 2 mites and gave them both. I mean, she could have kept one for herself and no one would have said anything. No one would have judged her or blamed her. Instead, she gave out of extreme generosity. Jesus said, "This poor widow has put in more than all those who have given." He didn't say that she put in more than any one of them. He said that she put in more than all of them put together. That's how much what she gave meant to Jesus. They all put in out of their abundance, but she gave out of her poverty. She put in all that she had. This explains how Jesus could say that the widow put in more than all. It was because all the others gave out of their abundance, but she gave sacrificially. Jesus' principle here shows us that before God, the spirit of giving determines the value of the gift more than the amount. God doesn't want grudgingly given money or guilt money. God loves the cheerful giver. The widow challenged the mindset that says, "I'll give when I have more." She had virtually nothing, yet she was a giver. This means that we can all please God with our giving just as much as the richest man can please God with his giving. Whatever we give sacrificially to God, he sees it and is pleased. When you sacrifice your sleep to wake up early or stay up late to spend time with God, he sees that. When all you have is $10 to your name and you give it to God, he sees that. When the last thing you have is time because you have kids and you're married and you have a job and you have a house, but you still show up to serve at the church, he sees that. When you love his children like he loves them, when they're hard to love, he sees that. When you put your needs and your wants below someone else's, he sees that. I mean, worshiping God sacrificially is not just sacrificing your sleep or sacrificing your money. It is also loving others. I mean, the second greatest commandment was to love your neighbor as yourself. That is worshiping God. Worshiping God is in everyday life. It's not just in a church. It's not just when you're reading his word or listening to praise and worship or watching a message. It's also when you're loving others, when you're living your life according to how he instructed you to, when you choose his ways, when logistically it's so much easier to choose the world's ways. Worship is sacrifice. True worship costs something. It's about giving God our best. Mary's worship was misunderstood, but that didn't keep her from it. The widow's worship took everything she had, but she didn't give it a second thought. Worship requires surrender of pride, resources, and reputation. Very few are going to understand your worship, but they don't need to. God didn't say, worship me in a way that everyone will understand. Because when it comes to him, God doesn't care what other people think. You're not living for them. Their approval is the last of his concern. And what we pour out for God is never wasted. He sees that. And there is a great reward for your sacrifice. But we don't sacrifice because there's great reward. Because that's not a sacrifice. I know that if I wake up early in the mornings and read my Bible, or if I serve at the church, then there's going to be a great reward for me. Like I'm going to get a prize. That's not why we do it. That's not the spirit of a cheerful giver. You're in it for you. God doesn't want that either. He wants your heart and your motives to be pure, not worried about anyone else or anything else. But what can I do for the Lord? What can I give to the one who gave me everything? Worship is offering God your everything, even when others don't understand. I mean, even when others don't understand, that sounds like that's going to be a rarity, but that's actually the majority. That's frequent. Others are not going to understand. They're not going to understand why I can't hang out with them because I'm helping my church do this thing. Or I can't go somewhere because I'm actually going to a Christian conference. Or I would rather go to a Christian conference than go to this concert. They don't understand when I like to be home by 7:30 so that I can be ready for bed and spend time with God before I go to bed. They don't understand when I can't schedule meetings before 10 o'clock because that's my Jesus time. They don't understand when I can't go out to lunch, but they just saw me put money in the offering plate. They don't understand when I won't listen to certain music, when I won't watch certain shows. It's not real. It's not that bad. It's just a song. But I know that what I pour into myself, what goes in my ears, goes into my brain and down into my heart. And it affects what I give out, what I pour out. And I want God and others to get my overflow of things that are pure and heavenly, not of things of this world. True worship is a sacrifice. But why is it so hard for us to sacrifice things that are so minuscule at the end of the day? Yet Jesus gave his very own life for us. He was the greatest sacrifice of all. And we can't sacrifice a little bit of sleep, a little bit of time, a little bit of money, whatever it is. I mean, when you compare the two, a life for some time, a life for a tithe, A life for some sleep. Nothing that we could ever give compares to a life. But yet he really doesn't even ask for much. He doesn't ask you to give your life. He's like, hey, you don't have to go through all that. You don't got to do all that. Just spend some time with me. I just want to get to know each other. And even saying that gives me chills, because God, literal chills if you could see, because God of the whole entire universe just wants to spend some time with you. He's like, hey, today, could we get dinner? Today, could we have coffee together? Today, could you help the rest of the church body put on this event that's going to lead more people to the kingdom, to eternal life? When you look at it that way, when you look at the fact that he's really not asking for much, when he gave it all and he has every right to ask for everything, it really helps me put into perspective that in comparison, it's not that much of a sacrifice at all. But yes, at the end of the day, true worship is sacrificial. I love you guys so much, and I really appreciate you being here, and those that share and like and subscribe and all the things. It really means a lot, and I am just super thankful and humbled by the fact that God uses me to do this, to be a vessel of his word and his truth to share with you guys. And I just appreciate you choosing the garden to be a source for your growth. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.